Hi, I'm Gordon, and this is the last video in this series. I'm not going to be going through any code here, but I do want to discuss some of the results that we got with our combination of BERT for sentiment analysis and LDA for topic modeling. We combined these two and drilled down to the sentence level in order to make a first pass attempt here at an aspect-based sentiment analysis, which the whole point is to understand not only whether a statement is positive or negative in sentiment, but also what is being discussed, right? Which aspect of the thing being talked about are we looking at, right? Okay, and we went through this project starting with BERT. We moved into LDA next. I've said this several times before, but I want to reiterate, LDA is not considered, it's not a traditional algorithm for us to use at the sentence level, okay? And what I'm showing you right now, just a couple of quick things. First of all, the original paper published in which the LDA algorithm was first conceived. And then also here, I've got a quote from a much more recent work, which is on the topic of aspect-based sentiment analysis. And these authors point out very early on in their work that LDA is not intended for short texts. Specifically, they point out that the issues it encounters are due to data sparsity and the lack of co-occurrence patterns. Well, with the corpus that I'm working with here, you'll remember these are scouting reports for NHL draft eligible players. Without having any specific metrics to point to, I can state from personal experience, having read all of these reports, that they're much more constricted in the language that they use. They make use of a fairly limited vocabulary. And this makes sense if we think about the occasion for writing for scouting reports, or really any attempt to objectively assess various different things, right? If we're trying to compare various different things along one set of guidelines, we do need to sort of constrict the ways that we talk about and assess the attributes of those things. And that would be true for player evaluation, but it's also true for, let's say we're writing up reports about various real estate opportunities, right? We need to, if we're doing this for a professional purpose, we need to make sure that we are objectively assessing what's going on, and that means looking at the same things over and over again. So because of this occasion for writing being, certainly different from a collection of tweets or movie reviews, etc., because of the unique nature of the text that we're working with, as I'm going to show you here, LDA does a lot better at the sentence level for this problem than it would in something else. And that's simply due to the fact that we see, there is not a lack of co-occurrence patterns. We see the same words showing up together in the same sentences over and over again. And one quick comment here, and then I'm going to actually show some of the results from the aspect-based sentiment analysis that we did perform here. But one quick comment, I know that some researchers recently have been working with LDA at the sentence level, and in order to adapt it to work at the sentence level, they've gone through the process of creating synthetic documents. And in my understanding of what this actually means, they are clipping similar sentences and making large documents out of those sentences. So these are, I'll show you this next slide here, and we can talk about that briefly. So here's the results from one of our topics, and remember, we asked our algorithm to come up with 12 different topics. I'm going to show you 3 of those 12. Admittedly, these are the best 3. But okay, what are we looking at here? We're looking at sentences that I have pulled out. I went through I believe it was 10 different scouting reports after having completed both the sentiment analysis and the topic modeling. And I as we went through in previous videos here, I used the LDA algorithm. I leveraged it in order to sort of assign what the most likely topic was for each sentence. And this is one category where all of these sentences, according to the process we went through, all belong in the same category. They're all talking about the same thing. And I think that this is a fantastic example, because here what we are seeing, I've highlighted the words that seem to be showing up over and over again. Here what we're talking about is the defensive qualities, usually the defensive qualities of forwards, although it's not exclusive to the forward group. But here we're seeing, talk about their defensive play, obviously makes sense here, but also shutting down opposing players. And we see penalty kill or penalty killers showing up again and again. Those are the words that really seem to define this category. And, certainly if we went through everything, I'm confident that we would find sentences in this category that did not belong. And we are stretching the LDA algorithm really to its limits here. So it's to be expected that some of these results aren't going to make as much sense. Now, on the sentiment analysis side of things, I think we can see here pretty good representation of some strengths and weaknesses. So, for instance, the sentence at the top here saying this player embraces the physical game and they can lay hits, they're a fine defensive forward. This seems like a positive statement, and I am showing that +3 there to indicate that all 3 of my models in the ensemble BERT model voted this as a positive sentiment. The next one says something negative, and we get there with 2 of our 3 models recognizing this is a negative statement, saying this is not the biggest player and their defensive play needs work. The third statement here, positive, and I think if you can read that, you would agree. Everything else makes good sense. There are certainly some things to quibble with, and the last sentence here says that this player is a top-end playmaker and also a very good defensive forward who's been one of his team's top penalty killers. One of our models here, one of our BERT sentiment models, is telling us this is a negative sentiment. Clearly, that's not ideal. And as I mentioned when we were talking about BERT in the early videos for this series, we didn't spend a lot of time making a first-class model. We went the fast and dirty route here. So there are certainly ways that we can improve. But overall, as far as aspect-based sentiment analysis goes, our results here are promising, and they're much more promising than what you might expect if you think, LDA is not going to work at the sentence level. Typically it won't, but when we see this sort of constricted language, it helps. Okay, here's a second category, and this category really, these sentences seem to all be about skating, with the exception of one, which I'll point out in a second. But you can see here our sentiment classifiers have done a pretty good job. This first statement at the top here says this player can deke out a defender, make a highlight reel pass, or speed by players. We could quibble with the fact that there are actually several things being talked about here. This is not simply about skating ability. And I think that would be a legitimate complaint. One of the things that I committed to in this project was doing aspect-based sentiment analysis just at the sentence level. With the way that we use language, you might see multiple aspects being discussed in a single sentence, and that's really what's happening here. So that's certainly another way that we could improve this process on another, a second iteration if we were to go through this from beginning to end. The second statement here, very clearly a negative statement, says that this player's main weakness is skating. And all 3 models agree that this is a negative statement. That's fantastic. From there, we see mention of speed, acceleration, and edge control all being high end. Perfect. That statement belongs in this category, and it is positive, as our classifiers all recognized it was. The next statement here, there's some disagreement amongst the classifiers, but again, certainly we're talking about skating, saying this player is a gifted skater with agility, good agility and good stride. Next statement here, high-end skater, agility, acceleration, pace, all good stuff. It's the next one here, which was written about Jack Eichel, that seems to be the odd duck, right? So this statement says nothing about skating, and for some reason two of our three sentiment classifiers say this is actually a negative statement. Perhaps because they are not recognizing what it means to be quote, impossible to get off the puck. In hockey, that's certainly not a bad thing, and here our classifiers maybe are being tripped up by that. It's difficult to say. Regardless, we've misclassified the sentiment, and also this statement does not seem to fit very well with the others. So if we were to say, you know, we want to search through all of these reports and try to understand which players these scouts think are good skaters and which ones they think are bad skaters. Based on this, we would misunderstand, because this would suggest to us that the scout thinks Eichel is a bad skater, and that's simply not true. So anyway, I won't go into detail on the last two. If you're able to read these, you can certainly see that they fit pretty well with the discussion of skating. There are things to quibble with this last one, where, you know, leading a rush is what's talked about. That certainly could be seen as having to do with your skating ability. If you know anything about hockey, then I think you would agree with me there. But the rest of this is, you know, puck skills, puck handling ability. So there's certainly room for debate as to whether this belongs with the other statements. This is the last category that I'm going to show you here. And the theme here seems to be mostly about physical play. I see a lot of discussion of players being, you know, what their size is, or mentioned specifically of their physical game shows up again and again, whether they are good in physical battles, that kind of thing, their energy, their effort. This is not an outstanding category. When I look at this, I see issues. Our algorithm can only do what it can do, and we haven't given it much to work with here. At the beginning of this, I made mention at the beginning of this video of the fact that one way you can help your LDA algorithm work at the sentence level, or at least work better, is to create and train it on synthetic documents where those co-occurrence patterns are much tighter. If I were to go through this process again on a second iteration, what I would do is pull out every sentence that on the first iteration we think belong together and create synthetic documents with them. And that's what I would train the algorithm on. I think that if we did that and then we came back and we said, okay, now reclassify, especially if we limited it only to the sentences that really seemed to fit together during that training process, I think we could probably end up with much better, much tighter categories and better identification as to which sentence belongs to which category or which topic. Okay, all right. Well, that's going to do it for this video and this project. Thanks so much for following along.